Okay, this video gives a second workaround for those of you who have been having difficulty with Visio, and it is really intended only for those who haven't been able to get any version of Visio working with either the ER diagram or the relational database modeling. That is, none of the two tools or templates are working for them. This video is really intended for them. Okay. And essentially what I'm showing you is, you can see from the date over here is 2007. This is a very simple drawing tool that I had used more than 10 years ago when I taught MIS310. It's a very simple piece of software. It's nowhere near as powerful as Visio, but it will do the job for your exam. So only if you are completely unable to use Visio in any form should you try using this. And in this video, I will show you how to draw an ER diagram using this particular tool. So what I have posted on Blackboard is this zip file called ER Assistant. That's the name of the software. So you just unzip this file, and when you unzip it, it'll create a folder. Let me open this folder with a file called ER Assistant set up, and you just double click on that file. You can see it's less than 1 megabyte large, so you can imagine it's not a very powerful piece of software. It was meant for classroom use actually. So it takes maybe 10-15 seconds to set up, and this only works on Windows. Okay, so those of you who have Macs, I hope you have your VM up and running, and you will first run VM and then run this install the software for the Windows environment. So once you set up the software by double clicking it, that's all you have to do. There's really nothing else you have to do. It will install in the default directory, and the icon on the desktop that it creates for the software is this icon over here. You will see an entity with a couple of lines on it, and it says ER Assistant. Okay, so once you've installed the software, you're all set. I'm just going to double click it, and here is the ER Assistant software. Okay, we're going to use this. So I'll show you two things. I'll show you how to use this software to draw an ER diagram, the conceptual data model. And in the second piece, I will show you how to take that conceptual data model and convert it to a relational database design using this same tool. Okay. All right. So let me quickly just show you. So you would start off with File and New, because we are about to create a new ER diagram. And let me first save it. So File, Save As, and let me just call it MIS310 ER Assistant and conceptual data model. Just any name for the file, CDM conceptual data model that I'm drawing. Okay, so here's a new file that I'm design that I'm about to create, and as soon as I've created this new file, you can see these buttons have come alive. They were shaded gray. So ER diagram consists of entities and relationships. I'm not going to go through the theory again. I just want to show you how to use this software tool to draw. So first I have to show you how to draw entities. So here you see this tool for an entity. It's a rectangle. Entities are represented by rectangles. So I pick it up. I click on the entity button, and you can see this little dialog box shows up, and it forces you to give the entity a name. So I say I'm about to create a new entity, so I click New, and then I say Student. This is the same example that I had given for the first Visio workaround, so I'll just follow up keep using the same example. Sorry, misspelled it. Student. Okay, so this is a regular entity. This is not a weak entity. And once I've given the name, now I click Attributes so that I can specify the name of the various attributes of this entity. So again, I click New because I'm about to create a new attribute. So Student ID is my first attribute, and I check this box telling the software that this is a primary key. And you can specify different data types. I don't really care for now what those data types are, so I'll just make it character 5. Okay, and then I'll create another attribute. You can see gradually these attributes for this entity student are being created. So the second attribute I will say is STU student name, and I will say it is character 10, let's say. And just to create another one. I'll create a third attribute called stu email. That's the student's email address, and I'll make it character 15, let's say. So now I click close. So I've finished specifying the attributes of the entity student, and I hit close again. So you can see the student entity has been created in this page. Okay, and I can move this around anywhere I want, and you can see that the primary key has been underlined, just the normal notation that we have learned. All right, so here is student. Now I will create a new entity called faculty, the second entity. So I click on the button which says entity, and you can see the student is already there. So I click new. Faculty is the name of the new entity. It's a regular entity. So now I go on to create its attributes. So here's attributes, click new. Faculty ID is the primary key. I check that off, and I make it character 5, let's say. Another attribute, I'll say fac name. I'll make that character 10, let's say. And the third attribute, I click new, and I type in fac email. That's the email address of the faculty member, character 10. Okay, so hit close. I hit close again. There's your second entity. Let me move it around here, faculty. And in the first tutorial for the Visio workaround, I had created a third entity called course. So let me create that. I click on this button which says entity, the rectangle button again. So now I have about to create a new entity called course. Course, it's a regular entity, that's the default. And I give it, create new attributes. So the first attribute, the new attribute would be course ID. Course ID, and let me make it character 5, character length 5. And let's give a couple of additional attributes. So one I will have is CRS name, that's the name of the course, and I'll make it character 15. The next attribute will be, I click on new to create a new attribute, will be CRS credit, the number of credit hours for the course, and let's make that numeric. Okay, or I can make that integer if you like. Where is integer? Somewhere here it's seen integer. Here we go, is integer. Okay, so I'm done creating the course. So here we go, I close again. So my 3 entities are created. So you've seen now how to create entities. So how do I create relationships? It's very easy. You see this button which says relationship here, REL. So you would click on that. So I'm going to create 2 relationships now. I'm going to create a many-to-many relationship between student and faculty, meaning one student can be taught by many faculty and one faculty can teach many students. And then I will create a one-to-many relationship between faculty and course. So one course can only be taught by one faculty member, but one faculty member can teach many courses. Okay, so I pick up relationship, I click on relationship, and again this dialog box opens up, and it forces you to give a name to every relationship. That's one thing I like about this very simple tool. So my first relationship will be the many-to-many relationship between student and faculty. So I click new. I'm about to create a new relationship. So we have to give it a name. So let's say teachers. Okay, so this is a regular relationship. If the relationship is an identifying relationship, meaning it's between a weak and a strong entity, then you would check this box, of course, but this is just a standard regular relationship. It'll show up as a dotted line. Okay, and now before I can close this box, I have to specify the cardinalities. Every relationship has a cardinality, right? So I've given the name of the relationship teachers, and then the software is asking you, this relationship connects which 2 entities. So I will say, I'll pick student, and then I'll pick faculty. It doesn't matter which one I pick first. I could have picked faculty here, and student here. It's a relationship between two entities. Okay, you just pick the two. But now the cardinalities have to be set. So the way you reason through this is very easy. One faculty member teaches at most many students, right? So one faculty member teaches at most many students, and at most zero. Zero means it's optional. So this is the at least part. This left side is the at most cardinality. Okay. So similarly, if you go in the reverse direction from student to faculty, one student can be taught by at least zero faculty members and at most many faculty members. So I've specified all the cardinalities. Okay, and now this software is actually quite better than Visio in one respect. It allows you to define attributes for the relationship. Okay, for instance, if the student, there's some other relationship between the faculty, some other property of this relationship, you can catch that there also. But we're not going to do that for our purposes here. So I click close, and let me bring it. So do you see the many-to-many relationship has been created? So one student is taught by at least zero and at most many faculty members. If you go in the reverse direction, one faculty member teaches at least zero and at most many students. All right. So now I'm going to show you a one-to-many relationship from faculty to course. So again, I pick relationship, the button, I click that button, and the software says, okay, you're about to create a new relationship. What do you want to call it? So I click new, and I have to give a name to the relationship. Unfortunately, I have already used up the name teachers, so I'll just cook up a name, let's say offers. So faculty offers a course. So it's a regular relationship. So it's a relationship between faculty and course. Okay, so now I have to specify the cardinalities. One faculty member teaches or offers at least zero, that means it's optional, and at most many courses. If you go in the reverse direction, one course is offered by at least zero and at most one faculty member. So we are saying team teaching is not allowed. That's our assumption. If team teaching was allowed, this would also be a many-to-many relationship. But I've deliberately shown it as a one-to-many, so that I can use it in the next part of the tutorial. Okay, so here's the one-to-many relationship, and we close it and bring it down here. So here's a one-to-many relationship, and again I want to show you a third type of relationship, which is a one-to-one, so that we can do the conversion later on. So the third type of relationship, I need to create a new entity for that. So I'll call it student club. Let's say I'm introducing a new entity called student club. So I click. So let me cancel this first. So notice I clicked on entity here because I want to create a new entity called student club. So I clicked on this box, the rectangle, and I then click new. So I give the name, I call the entity STU club. Okay, and it's a regular entity, and I need to give it some attributes. So let's say the attributes will be new club ID, and I call it the primary key, and then I give it some couple different attributes for it. Let's say club name, and I call it character 15, and I'll just create a third one. When was the club started? Okay, so that would be a date. Let's see, where do we have date? Yes, we have a data type. Close. So here we have our student club. You can see the primary key has been underlined, as we know it is. And now I'm going to create a one-to-one relationship between faculty and student club, meaning that every student club must have one faculty advisor, no more, no less. And one faculty may advise a student club, may not. Okay, so not all faculty members are advisors of student clubs. but if they are, they will advise no more than one club because it takes up a lot of time. That's my business rule that I'm cooking up for this particular example. So I'm about to create a new relationship. I click on REL and I'm about to create a new relationship. So I click new and I have to give it a name. So let's say SES, advisors. That's the name of the relationship. It's a regular relationship. It's a relationship between faculty and student club, and it's one-to-one. So one faculty member advises at least 0 and at most 1 student club, and one student club is advised by at least 1 and at most 1. So in other words, you can't have a student club without a faculty advisor. That's my assumption. So I click close, and let me pull this back here. So there's your one-to-one relationship between faculty and student club. So this is how you draw an ER diagram using this very simple software called ER Assistant. Okay, so let me save this file, and in the second part of this video I'm going to show you how to convert this to the relational database model. So this is your conceptual model. Do you see nowhere in the diagram do I have foreign keys, intersection entities, and things like that? So in the second part, I'm going to convert this to a relational database design using this particular tool itself, nothing else. All right. So first thing I do is I save it as under a different file name so that I don't get the two diagrams mixed up. Instead of CDM, I'll call it relational database model, RDM, relational database model. Okay. So here's my starting point. Now the conversion rules are simple. From going from a conceptual data model to a relational database design. That is, when you have a one-to-many relationship in the ERD, the primary key of the one becomes the foreign key of the many. So all you have to do is take the primary key faculty ID, add a new attribute to course called faculty ID, and call it the foreign key. Okay, and identify it as the foreign key. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to highlight course, and here is, I'm going to click on this box called entity. Let me make some space here. So basically what I want to do is I want to take this primary key faculty ID and add it to course as a foreign key. So I need to add an attribute to course. So I identify the entity called course, and I want to add an attribute, right? So I just click on attribute, and here you have your dialog box for course, and I need to add an attribute over here called faculty ID. So I click new and I say faculty ID, and then just for my own benefit, and you should do this for me also to grade your test if you happen to use this software, just put FK. So that will tell me that you know that you have transferred the primary key over as a foreign key. Okay, and I'll make it character, whatever the data type, really doesn't matter all that much here for the exam. So I click close, and you see that the primary key has been put in as the foreign key. Now this software does not have the ability to put dotted underline beneath the foreign key. Oh, what happened to course ID? Let me see. Here's the course attributes. So here's course ID. Oh, here's the primary key. Somehow it had gotten off. Okay, so I close it again. So there's your course ID, and I know faculty ID is the primary key. So I have converted one relationship in the ER diagram to the relational database model. Now I'm going to convert the one-to-one relationship, and you know the rule is you take one of the primary keys and make it the foreign key of the other, but not both. So I could take faculty ID and make it the foreign key of student club, or I could take club ID and make it the foreign key of a faculty. Okay, so in this case, since the one of them is optional and the other is mandatory, then it probably would be better to take the club ID and put it in as the as the foreign key of faculty, but you could do it either way. So again, let me just pick student club here. So I click on entity, because what I'm about to do is add an attribute to the entity called student club, and that attribute's name will be faculty ID. So I highlight student club, okay, and I click on attributes. Okay, so club ID, you can see, is the primary key of student club. So I'm going to add an attribute, a new attribute called faculty ID, and I will just add the acronym FK after it. This is something I'm doing to remind myself that that's the foreign key. And I close, and there's your foreign key faculty. So then when I look at this in your exam, I know that you have transferred the primary key of one and made it the foreign key of the other side. Okay, what the software cannot do is say that since this is a one-to-one relationship, that there cannot be duplicates. Those finer details it cannot do, but it will suffice for this. Is a workaround. I'm trying to get around the software problem, but this will do. Okay, so the last thing that remains is how to convert this many-to-many relationship. And by now you know that the way you do that is by creating an intersection entity, a new entity with a composite primary key that consists of the primary key of student and the primary key of faculty. So let's do that. So I will create a new entity. So I clicked on the entity button, and then I click new, and I'll just give it some name. I'll call it STU fac. Okay, and that's the name of the entity. And let's give it, we have to create the attributes. So the first attribute will be the primary key of student, that is student ID. So I click new, STU ID. I check primary key because it's part of the primary key, and then I say character 5. Another attribute will be the primary key of faculty, because this is a composite primary key. It's an intersection entity. So the attribute will be faculty ID, primary key, and I'll also make it character 5. And I'll give a third attribute, which is the course grade. No, we'll make up a third attribute. Let's say, what should we say? Another attribute for this relationship, we could say date. Some kind of date. Okay, so I'm just cooking up a third attribute. You could think of anything reasonable as a third attribute, but you don't have to have a third attribute. So I click close, and I click close. So so here is the new entity. Remember that the sole purpose this new entity exists is to connect these two. Okay, you cannot represent a many-to-many relationship directly using a pair of foreign keys. So you have to have this composite for a primary key here. So you replace the one-to-many relationship by a pair, you replace the many-to-many relationship by a pair of one-to-many. So let's do that next. So I'm going to create a one-to-many relationship from student to student fac, and another one from faculty to student fac, and then I'll get rid of this many-to-many. Okay, so let's do that next. So relationship, new relationship, and I will say, I'll give it a name, STU intersect, meaning this is a relationship from student to this intersection entity, and it's a one-to-many relationship. So the first entity is student, the second entity is student fac, this intersection entity. So here's the second entity, STU fac. Here's the second entity. So one student is related to many of these intersection entities, but any one intersection entity is related to only one student. Okay, so it's a one-to-many relationship. So one student is related to at most many and at least 0 intersection entities, and one of the intersection is related to at least 1 and at most 1. Okay, so I close. Oh, this doesn't look nice. Let me pull this out here. So there's your one-to-many relationship from student to student fact. Now, this relationship I would draw as an identifying relationship, because student fact is a weak entity, really. The only reason it exists is because you're connecting student and faculty. It has no existence in and of itself. So what I might do is, what would be appropriate to do is, I click on entity here and I highlight student fact. Where is it? Here's student fact. And I say, hey, this is not just any kind of entity, it's a weak entity. Okay, so I close it and we can see those little hash marks on the side. Okay, and if you do this, then this particular relationship, the student intersect, if you click on relation, here's student intersect, you make it an identifying relationship. And when you do that, you can see the line becomes solid. Okay, so the choice is, that's a design choice you have to make. Which one? I'm just showing you how to show that in the diagram. Okay, so let's say I decide otherwise. I can always go back to entity, pick student fact here and change it back to a regular entity if I made a mistake or if I change my mind. So you can see those hash marks go away from the side. When I do that, I should change this relationship back to a regular relationship. So I click on REL and here is student intersect, and instead of saying identifying, I check it to be a regular entity. Okay, a regular relationship. So I close and you can see this dotted mark. Now let me draw a one-to-many relationship from faculty to student fact. So here's, I click on relationship, I put in a new relationship by clicking on new, and I give it the name fact intersect. And this is again a one-to-many relationship. So I pick faculty as the first entity, student, what is this? Student fact as the second entity. Oh, sorry, faculty as the first and student fact as the second. So it's at least 0 and at most many. One faculty member is connected to at least 0 and at most many of these intersection records. And one intersection record is connected to exactly one faculty. So at least 1 and at most 1. Okay. So let me move that here. So here's the relationship. So I've replaced the many-to-many relationship by a pair of one-to-many relationship. And so this entity called student fact has your composite primary key, student ID, faculty ID, and one foreign key each. Okay. So if you want to be really precise, what you could do is you can click, you could click on entity here. And for student fact, this box called student faculty, okay, go to attributes, and where it's a student ID, you could also say FK. And then for faculty ID, you could also say FK. Let me close this and notice what the names become. So what this, when you look at this picture, it tells you that student fact has a composite primary key called student ID, faculty ID. Okay, but student ID and faculty ID individually are foreign keys that connect to the parent tables. So once I have set up these pair of one-to-many relationships, this one, the teachers relationship, this teachers relationship, I can delete. So I highlight it and I delete it. It says, are you sure you want to delete? Yes. I close it and that relationship goes away. So I have converted the ER diagram to a relational database design. So you can see all the primary keys, the foreign keys, and the one-to-one, one-to-many, and the many-to-many relationships. Okay, so you can use this software called ER Assistant. It's very simple. If your Visio, none of the Visio versions are working. I hope this tutorial was helpful.